What does a mother see when she looks into her child's eyes? I used to see my own future there, my old age, my hopes, my very reason to keep going, until the moment those same eyes looked at me with hatred, and I heard the sound of this lock turning. My name is Margaret, and the one who locked me in this cold, airless cellar is none other than my own son, Benjamin, the boy I carried for 9 long months.
When I married my late husband, Edward, we had nothing in our pockets but our dreams and a promise to each other. No matter what, we would never part from honesty, and we would give our children an honorable life. Edward, may he rest in peace, was an angel of a man and incredibly hard-working. He built this house we live in with his own hands, brick by brick, working day and night and taking on laboring jobs for others to earn the money. When Benjamin was born, that house finally became a home. The first time Edward held our son, he wept with joy and swore, "This child is our greatest treasure, Margaret. We'll put him through the best schools." The years flowed like water. We ate less so Benjamin could eat. We wore less so he could wear better clothes. We always gave up our own wants so he would never feel lacking or hang his head before his peers. Sadly, our happiness did not last. Benjamin had only just started university when, without warning, we lost the pillar of our home, Edward, to a heart attack. In that vast house, my son and I were left utterly alone, clinging to one another. The months after my husband's death felt as if the cement that held our lives together had been scraped away. Benjamin, suddenly burdened with a grown-up grief on his young shoulders, and me, inexperienced and worried, held on to each other and tried to keep standing. While he went to university and spent his spare hours doing small repair jobs in his late father's old workshop to help at home, I secretly took in sewing for neighbors and stayed up nights paying his school bills. I knew that the only inheritance Edward had truly left us, his love for his child, could only lift us out of this poverty if Benjamin succeeded in his studies. My son did not disappoint his father. When he graduated and took a job as an engineer at a large firm in London, it felt as if the world had opened up beneath my feet. At last, I would see my son make his way, start his own household, and one day enjoy grandchildren. But in the middle of that happiness, the evening Benjamin came in and said, "Mom, wait until you meet someone," and introduced the girl he'd brought with him. Sophie cast a shadow over everything. The instant I saw her, my experienced eye told me it wasn't love for my son that dominated her. It was an interest in this detached house that belonged to his father. Edward loved her so fiercely that he couldn't see the contempt behind her false politeness to me, nor the way she glanced at every corner of Edward's handiwork as if it were shabby and out of date. From the day she set foot in my peaceful home, that home slowly began to change, and for me to feel like a prison. The months following my son's meeting with that girl felt like a winter that would never end. The kind where the sun still rises but gives no warmth. The cheerful boy who once would have torn the world apart if anything happened to his mother was gone. In his place stood a cold, distant man
who hung on Sophie's every word, treating her opinions as law. Whenever I brewed them a cup of tea with all the love a mother could pour into it, I shrank under Sophie's condescending glances, while Benjamin worried not about his mother's kindness, but about whether his fiancée was uncomfortable. In my own living room, filled with Edward's memory, I had become an unwanted guest, a shadow in my own home. It didn't take long for me to realize that Sophie's interest was not in the house itself, but in the land beneath it. She no longer hid it, walking around with measuring tapes and architectural plans, commanding that this wall will go, that room will be demolished, we'll have a pool here. Every corner built with my late husband's sweat became nothing more than a renovation project in her eyes. One evening, Benjamin sat across from me, not with his own voice, but with Sophie's spirit speaking through him, and said, "Mom, Sophie and I are getting married. We've decided to sell this old house and build a modern villa that suits us both. You'll have your room, of course, but we'll need you to make a few sacrifices for now." The pain of hearing that crushed my heart. "Son, this house is your father's legacy. How can you sell it?" I wanted to say, but there was no trace of the compassion that once filled his eyes. He was no longer my son, only a puppet in the hands of an ambitious woman desperate to erase every trace of the past. Before long, in the garden filled with Edward's memories, a grand yet soulless wedding took place, one where no one even thought to ask my opinion. For my son's happiness, I kept silent, standing quietly in a corner as strangers trampled through my home, turning the legacy of my husband into decoration. I swallowed my tears and endured. The day after the wedding, instead of newlywed joy, an invasion began. Sophie ordered every object I cherished, every piece of Edward's handiwork to be thrown out, calling them cheap taste and outdated antiques. And then I finally understood what Benjamin had meant by sacrifice. Sophie had set her eyes on my bedroom, the sacred space where Edward and I had shared our life, where his last breath had filled the air. She whispered to my son that she would turn it into her dressing room and study, and that I no longer needed such a large space. His silence in response destroyed the last flicker of hope in me. And so I moved into the small, damp storage room, the one where my husband used to keep his old tools, the space Benjamin deemed temporary until the renovations were done. From being the lady of the house, I had become a burden, an extra presence in my own home. As I clung to Edward's photograph in that airless room, the laughter and music echoing from upstairs pierced my heart like a blade. That's when I understood. While my son had tossed his mother aside like an old sack, he had already begun to enjoy his new life.
The sacrifice my son spoke of began the next morning with the roar of drills shaking the walls of my house, a sound like an earthquake. But it wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of Sophie's orders being carried out, sledgehammers striking down the memories of Edward. And I, in that tiny, airless storage room, flinched with every blow, listening helplessly to the destruction of my life. Through the crack of the door, I saw how our bedroom, the room where my husband took his last breath, was being torn apart,
reduced to rubble to make way for Sophie's luxurious dressing room. Each crash of a hammer felt like it struck my heart, stealing my breath away. Meanwhile, Benjamin stood proudly in the garden, phone in hand, looking around as if he were supervising a construction site, not the demolition of his father's legacy. I wasn't even allowed to step into my own kitchen to get a glass of water. My daughter-in-law, that refined lady, was afraid I might scratch her expensive marble countertops or make a mess. Only kindness I was shown was a jug of water left by my door, and, toward evening, a cold plate of leftovers from their lavish dinners. One afternoon, I managed to catch Benjamin amid the dust and noise. "Son, what are you doing? Your father must be turning in his grave," I said, trembling. He avoided my eyes and muttered, "Mom, not now. Sophie's busy. Please, just stay out of the way," before gently but firmly pushing me back into my room. The look in his eyes wasn't guilt. It was fear of disappointing her. That realization broke something deep inside me. At night, when the noise quieted, I lay clutching Edward's photograph in the damp darkness, crying silently. From the other side of the house, the part already renewed, I could hear Benjamin and Sophie laughing over dinner, talking cheerfully as if they were building a bright new future instead of tearing down the past. After weeks of that torment, one day the door burst open again without a knock. Sophie stood there, clutching rolls of paper, blueprints, looking at me as though I were an old piece of furniture to be cleared away. Turning to my son, she said coldly, "Darling, we'll need to include this small room in the plan too. It'll make a good pantry. Your mom's musty old things can't stay next to my new kitchen." That's when I realized even the single square meter I occupied was too much for them. I looked at my son, searching his face for a flicker of mercy, for a hint of courage, for him to say, "No, Sophie, that's my mother." But Benjamin, so small beside his wife, couldn't even meet my gaze. "Mom," he said softly, "we found you a quieter, more peaceful spot. At least you won't have to endure the noise down there." He pointed toward the staircase leading to the cellar. That peaceful spot was the cold basement where Edward used to keep his firewood and old boiler parts. And as I descended those pitch-black stairs, clinging to my late husband's memory, I understood. Every step I had taken out of love for my son had led me straight into ruin. When my feet touched the damp earth floor, Benjamin called down, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll bring you your meals." Then the heavy iron door groaned shut, and I heard the bolt slide from the other side. That sound wasn't just the lock turning. It was my son's conscience sealing me away for good. The moment I heard that heavy iron door lock behind me and my son's pitiless footsteps fade up the stairs and disappear, time stopped. The pitch-black darkness that swallowed me didn't just blind my eyes, it seeped into my mind, into the last hopeful corners of my soul. I stood frozen on the cold ground for what felt like hours, barely breathing, my heart refusing to accept what had just happened. When I finally gathered the courage to move, I ran my trembling hands along the walls, breathing in the damp, moldy air that reeked of rust and earth. Every surface I touched, The clammy, wet concrete, the cold metal pipes, the sticky cobwebs brushing against my face whispered the same unbearable truth. This was no nightmare. My own son had entombed me in my own home. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw in the corner the ragged mattress where Edward used to rest his tools. My knees gave way beneath me, and I collapsed beside it. I began to tremble, not from cold, but from the shame of realizing that my blind love, my endless faith in my son, had brought me to this degradation. While I sat there, clinging to the memory of my husband, lost in despair, I could hear laughter and music coming from just above me, from what used to be my home. Sophie's shrill giggles cut through the ceiling, mocking me, while Benjamin's voice joined in, cheerful and alive. They were celebrating their paradise right above my hell. That night, I didn't sleep for a single second. I lay on that freezing mattress, clutching Edward's faded photograph, whispering through tears, "Edward, did you leave this house to me or to these heartless people?" When the first faint rays of daylight crept through the tiny vent, I understood that door might never open again, and I, a mother, would spend the rest of my days here, a prisoner at the mercy of her own child. The morning after that first night, a night no different from a nightmare, I woke to the muffled sounds of life continuing upstairs, a life that no longer belonged to me. Then I noticed a porcelain plate shoved roughly beneath the iron door. Scraps of stale bread and a few olives, barely enough to feed a stray animal. Down in that airless pit, thick with the smell of earth and decay, I lost all sense of time. I could no longer tell whether it was day or night, whether the sun rose or not. The only way I measured time was by the pale beam of light that shifted across the wall through the vent above, and by the growing ache of hunger twisting my stomach like a vice. Eventually, half numb with cold and hunger, I dragged myself up and began pounding on the iron door with what little strength I had left. "My son, Benjamin, it's your mother. Please, open the door. Give me a drop of water," I cried, my voice breaking. But the only answer was the hollow echo of my own despair bouncing off the stone walls. For a fleeting moment, I dared to hope that maybe, by some miracle, my son would hear me, that a spark of conscience might still live within him. Instead, from the top of the stairs, I heard Sophie's venomous voice cut through the silence. "Shut your mouth, you miserable old woman. Benjamin doesn't want to hear your awful wailing. If you scream again, you won't even get that stale bread." Her words sliced through me like a blade, proof that my son's will now belonged entirely to her. That final threat snuffed out the last flicker of hope inside me. I crawled back to my filthy corner, collapsed on that tattered mattress, and realized that the only force capable of freeing me from this place would not be my son's conscience, but the mercy of death itself. And so, in that icy darkness, I fell silent and began to wait for my fate. From the moment my knees buckled before that heavy iron door, from the instant I fell silent under Sophie's venomous threats, Time broke away from the world above. Days, weeks, perhaps months slipped through my fingers without meaning. I no longer counted them. I lived instead by the rhythm of hunger twisting my stomach and the faint movement of the pale light filtering through the tiny vent, crawling slowly across the damp wall. As my eyes grew used to the darkness, my mind began to betray me, playing strange tricks, perhaps to comfort me, or perhaps to drive me mad. When I leaned my back against the wet wall, sometimes I imagined Edward's gentle face appearing before me, smiling with that same calm kindness. "Oh, Edward," I would whisper, "the dreams we built for our son have collapsed, and I'm buried beneath their ruins." While I lay on the frozen ground clutching Edward's photograph, dreaming of a single bite of bread, the sounds of their new life seeped down through the ceiling above me. The clatter of cutlery, bursts of laughter, Sophie giving orders to her guests, Benjamin's hollow, cheerful chatter, all of it echoed through the stone and filled my darkness with pain. Each sound was a cruel reminder that while I starved below, they feasted in what used to be my home, surviving on whatever scraps were shoved under the door at unpredictable hours, always cold and always small. My body began to waste away. The same hands that once cooked for my husband and raised my son now trembled like brittle twigs. The cold sank deep into my bones. Every breath stung my chest like needles, warning me that the end was near. I had no tears left, no strength to curse or beg. Leaning against that damp wall, I waited, not for mercy, not even for rescue, but for the moment I would join Edward and leave this torment behind. And just when I thought I had reached the bottom of despair, my eyes caught something I had never noticed before, and faint shape in the corner, half buried in shadow. An old, forgotten chest. It was one of those wooden boxes Edward used to keep, the kind he'd insist on saving. "You never know when it might come in handy," he'd say with a smile. Now, in this pit of hopelessness, that chest suddenly became the only solid, real thing in my world. Despite the pain in my legs and the ache in my bones, I forced myself to crawl toward it across the damp floor. Its lid was thick with dust and cobwebs, and the iron clasp was stiff with rust, ice cold to the touch. When I tried to pry it open, my brittle fingernails cracked against the metal, but I didn't feel the pain. Curiosity, sharp and strange, had drowned out everything else. At last, with a long, harsh creak, the lock gave way. A weak beam of light from the vent fell across what lay inside, revealing the faint smell of mold and mothballs, and beneath it, the relics of a shared lifetime. Edward's old patched-work overalls, a few rusted tools, and beneath them all, a small tin box wrapped carefully in a piece of cloth. I pressed his old overalls to my face, breathing in the ghost of his scent one last time. Then my hand found the tin box. I had never seen it before. Whatever was inside, Edward had hidden it, even from me, his wife, his companion through every storm. In that freezing cellar, clutching that box in my trembling hands, the laughter from above and the hunger in my stomach seemed to fade into silence. It wasn't hope that I felt, not exactly, but in that small locked box, I sensed that Edward had left me one final secret, one last connection to the world above. And no matter what it cost, I knew I had to open it. The small tin box in my hands was as cold as the air of that cellar itself. When I tried to force open the tiny lock with my weak, trembling fingers, their nails cracked and raw, the only sound was metal scraping against metal. Nothing moved. It was as if my late husband's secret had been sealed inside this simple box for eternity. Realizing my bare hands would never win against it, my eyes drifted back to the bottom of the wooden chest, to the rusted tools beneath Edward's old patched overalls. Perhaps, I thought, the answer to unlocking what he had hidden from me would come from the very thing he had once used daily. His old splinter-handled screwdriver. My body shook violently from the cold and hunger as I tried to steady my hands. I wedged the rusted screwdriver into the thin seam of the lock, prying it like a lever. Each failed attempt made that piercing squeal of metal ring through the tomb-like silence of the cellar, echoing my growing despair. Then, at the very moment I pushed with what little strength I had left, feeling the lid give way slightly, I heard Sophie's shrill laughter above me. She was talking to Benjamin about the new chandeliers they were ordering, her voice bright and carefree, as though beneath her feet there wasn't a mother trapped in the dark, but simply empty space. That laughter, so careless, so alive, filled me not with sorrow this time, but with fury. With one final desperate push, I forced the screwdriver deeper until the corroded lock gave way with a sharp crack. The lid burst open, and I held my breath. In the thin ray of light from the vent, I leaned forward, trembling, to see what my husband had left behind. Inside the small, dark box lay only two things. One was a piece of old yellowed paper, folded over and over until it was soft at the edges. The other was a small, peculiar key, too small for any door I knew. For a moment, I couldn't move. My heart seemed to stop right there in that freezing cellar. With shaking fingers, I reached for the paper, wondering if it was a confession, a forgotten debt, or something far worse. The brittle sheet crackled between my fingers as I unfolded it carefully, terrified it would tear. It wasn't a letter. It was a bank book, the old kind, the ink faded, the cover worn thin. And on it, side by side, were our names, Edward and Margaret Turner. I forgot all about the strange little key. Under the weak light filtering from the vent, I began to flip through the pages. When I reached the final balance line, my breath caught. The number staring back at me made my blood run cold. It was a fortune, an amount so vast that my honest, laboring husband could never have earned it in a lifetime. My head began to pound. Where had this money come from? Why had Edward hidden it from me, his wife, his closest confidant? And that small key, what did it open? What secret door or safe had he locked away from the world? As I sat there trembling, the sound of Sophie's laughter drifted once again from above, her voice echoing through the floorboards. And I realized with a shudder that while she walked freely on the wealth beneath her feet, I might be sitting on the very secret that had destroyed us all.
The priceless secret I held in my hands, the bank book that proved Edward's hidden fortune, lay like a dream amidst the filth and the numb fingers of my frozen hands. It felt so utterly at odds with the squalor I was living in that it couldn't possibly be real. I couldn't comprehend how Edward, the honest man I'd always known, the one who brought bread home with the sweat of his brow, could have hidden such an enormous sum from me, his wife of 40 years. The discovery threw a shadow of doubt over every fond memory I had of him, turned that gentle face I loved into something I didn't recognize. My eyes drifted from the bank book to the little rusty key left at the bottom of the tin box, and a cold certainty crept over me. Edward's secret was more than a bank balance. The true treasure, or the danger, might lie behind whatever lock that tiny key opened. At that very instant, Sophie's shrill laughter floated down from above, mercilessly celebrating the life built on top of my misery. Like a bolt from the blue, the idea struck me. This fortune wasn't only Edward's legacy, it could be my way out. It could be the weapon I used to free myself from this pit and to strike back at those heartless people. The ravenous cold and the gnawing hunger that had consumed me only moments before suddenly receded. I was no longer the helpless Margaret waiting to die in this cellar. I was the keeper of Edward's secret and the guardian of an inconceivable fortune. I had to live. I had to get out. I had to discover the truth behind that money. Cradling the bank book and the little key to my chest filled me with a new strength. Those stale crumbs and cold plates shoved beneath the door were no longer insults. They were fuel to keep me going until I could escape this hell. I wiped away tears and stopped whining. Instead, I began to study my tomb. I memorized every inch of it, the damp walls, the holes where the boiler pipes ran, even the tiny ventilation grill high in the ceiling, searching for the smallest weakness, any crack I could exploit. More than the origin of the money, it was that oddly shaped key that occupied my thoughts. It was a sign that Edward's secret wasn't confined to a bank account. There might be something in the house itself, behind a wall, hidden away that I didn't know about. From then on, I listened to the sounds from above not as a starving victim, but as a prisoner learning patterns. I noted when they left the house, when they returned, when they slept, which rooms they used at which times. Every creak of a floorboard, every footstep became a clue. It quickly dawned on me that I couldn't haul myself out by brute force. I couldn't break the door or dig through solid stone. My only chance was either to seize a single careless moment of theirs or to devise a plan that would force them to open that heavy iron lock. After a full day had passed, another plate of leftovers was shoved beneath the iron door, right beside the stale bread I had refused to touch the day before. It was Sophie's way of mocking me, of proving how little my silence meant to her. Yet despite the burning in my stomach and the dizziness clouding my head, I remained motionless in my corner, shrouded in darkness. My body was begging me to give up, too weak even to reach for Edward's photograph, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. The bank book pressed against my chest reminded me that my silence had power.
It was my weapon, sharper than any of their cruel words or heartless laughter. As the second evening drew near, the quiet above was broken by muffled arguing. I heard Sophie's irritated voice hiss, "Benjamin, woman hasn't touched a thing for 2 days. She'll die down there and get us into trouble. Go check on her." Moments later, I caught the sound of my son's hesitant, guilty footsteps descending the stairs. When he stopped right outside the door, I held my breath. Instead of unlocking it, he knocked gently. "Mom, are you there? Why aren't you eating? Stop this nonsense." His voice trembled, not with anger, but with fear. I stayed utterly still on the cold mattress. I didn't answer. I didn't even groan. My silence, deliberate and unbroken, terrified him far more than any scream could have. I could hear him panic, his footsteps retreating up the stairs, shouting, "Sophie, she's not answering! Mom's not answering!" Then came Sophie's voice again, no longer sharp with arrogance, but edged with panic. "What do you mean she's not answering, Benjamin? If something's happened to her, we'll be ruined. Open the door now!" And that was when I knew my quiet defiance had worked. For the first time in what felt like centuries, I heard a sound that made my heart lurch, the creaking turn of a key in a rusted lock. The iron door groaned open with a thunderous clang, and a flood of light from the hallway poured in, searing my eyes. In the doorway stood 2 blurred shapes, their bodies framed by the light. My eyes, unaccustomed to brightness, could barely see their faces, but I knew from their trembling outlines it was my son, Benjamin, and his cruel wife, Sophie. I lay motionless on the filthy mattress like a corpse waiting to be claimed when Benjamin's cry filled the cellar. "Mom, Mom, what have you done to yourself?" He fell to his knees beside me, his hands shaking as he reached for my frail body. But though my limbs trembled with exhaustion, my mind was clear, fiercely, dangerously clear. As he tried to lift me from the damp floor, I pressed the bank book and the small, strange key beneath my sweater, holding them tight against my chest. They were my final secret, my last defense, proof that beneath my broken, starving frame lay the one thing they could neither buy nor destroy. The key to a fortune and to the reckoning that was about to begin. As my son's arms lifted me out of that freezing grave and carried me up into the blinding brightness of my house, my eyes, long accustomed only to blackness, burned as if someone were plunging 100 needles into them. My body felt as fragile as a dried leaf after that imprisonment in the damp earth. Yet my mind, sharpened by the secret pressed to my chest, was clearer than it had been in years. As we climbed the stairs, I heard Sophie rushing behind us, her false concern dripping from every word. "Oh, Benjamin, be careful. Carry her slowly. She's frozen to the bone. Poor love, how did you let this happen? I'll make you a hot broth straight away." I knew perfectly well her panic came not from pity, but from selfish fear of what would happen to her if I died down there. I could feel my son's heart fluttering like a trapped bird. His arms trembled beneath my bony weight.
He said nothing, only breathed quickly, unable to meet my face because my silence had struck his conscience harder than any reproach. They laid me not in the bedroom I had shared with Edward, which Sophie had turned into her dressing room, but in the far back guest room, seldom used, luxurious but soulless, where clean sheets had been spread on a soft bed. It was no mercy. It was the first bribe, the first hush payment, my silence bought with comfort. After Benjamin had carefully placed me on the bed, Sophie came in bearing a cup of warm milk. I still clutched, beneath my sweater, the bulge of Edward's bank book and the small key, my fingers weak but determined. I no longer trusted their mercy. I trusted my will and the dangerous secret I had smuggled from that filthy cellar. Lid half closed, I watched Sophie's stage ministrations and my son's face chalk white with guilt as if I were in a deep sleep. The softness of the sheets pressed into my aching body, but that comfort was not atonement. It was a self-serving shield they used to silence their consciences. Though my stomach rebelled after food after weeks of torture, I forced myself to eat the warm broth and dishes they offered. I forced myself because I had to survive, to unravel the mystery of Edward's fortune and the little key, and to escape this house that had become a furnace of cruelty. Every time Benjamin entered the room, he could not look me in the eye. When he asked, "Mom, how are you feeling?" his voice betrayed him with a sharp tremor. He would quickly avert his gaze as though my face were a living statue of his cowardice. Sophie, by contrast, staged her compassion like a director. She soothed Benjamin. "Don't push her, she's traumatized," while watching my every twitch and movement with hungry, calculating attention, eager to see whether I would recover or become a new problem to be disposed of. Lying among the clean sheets of that guest room, I realized clearly that my struggle had not ended in the cellar. It had only begun. The real battle would be played out beneath this veneer of false sympathy. I must pretend to be weak but sane, alert but forgetful, and bide my time until I could find the door that Edward's key would open. Only then could I turn their game against them. While my prison life in the guest room, wrapped in false sympathy, continued, I found that with every spoonful of warm broth they fed me, I regained a little more of the strength I had lost in that freezing cellar. But I kept that recovery hidden from Sophie, who watched me with those hawk-like eyes, by pretending to be dazed and forgetful. The size of the fortune in the bank book pressed to my chest made my head spin. But what gnawed at me in the nights was the question of why Edward had left such a key in that tin box. That tiny, odd piece of metal was surely the lock to the real secret, perhaps something hidden in the walls of this very house. Sophie hovered around me sotto voce, asking, "Mom, do you need anything?" as if she cared. She never left my side. I knew perfectly well this was not pity, but the vigilance of a guard who suspected I had awoken to a dangerous secret. One night, when I judged my first real shudders of recovery had passed, and the house fell silent, broken only by the muffled snores from Benjamin and Sophie's luxurious bedroom, I quietly slipped from the soft bed. Barefoot on the cold marble, clutching Edward's little key, I crept through my own home like a thief. I had to find where that key fit,
Which cupboard, which hidden drawer, or what corner behind the walls held the truth Edward had buried? Among the soulless luxuries Sophie had installed, I remembered the small, dark workroom at the back of the house, the only corner she had deemed worthless and spared from the demolition and redesign. That little room, once mere memories, had become a shrine to a secret. The heavy smell of rust and oil in the room still carried Edward's presence. My eyes fell on the old metal cabinet where he kept his most precious tools. On its door was a tiny keyhole, almost identical to the one on the tin box, something I had never noticed before. With trembling fingers, I fed the rusty little key into the lock. The metallic click echoed louder in the quiet night than the beat of my own heart. The key turned as if it had found its home, and the cabinet door eased open. But inside there were not more tools or paperwork. Instead, carefully arranged and labeled with dates and notes, there were dozens of old video cassettes and audio tapes. Recordings Edward had been making, secretly, year after year. He had been recording things, hiding them from me and from everyone. I barely understood what I had found when my hand reached for a tape bearing the most recent date. Its small label read, "Sophie and Benjamin, first conversation about the house." In that moment, I realized with horror that Edward's true legacy might be far more dangerous and far more powerful than the money in the bank. The cold plastic cassette in my hand felt as if it bore the weight of every secret Edward had hidden from me. As I read the words Sophie and Benjamin on the label, the suspicion in my heart turned into a terrible, burning curiosity. My husband had seen this betrayal coming and had collected the proof. Deeper in the metal cabinet, I found Edward's old but sturdy handheld video camera and a pair of headphones. He had not only recorded things, he had prepared the means to watch them in secret. That discovery was a small revelation. I didn't need the enormous television in the living room to see the tapes. I only needed that little camera and the headphones to learn the truth. Terrified that my son and daughter-in-law might come upstairs, I shoved the camera, the headphones, and the cassette labeled First Visit into my nightdress beside the bank book I already carried beneath my sweater. The weight at my chest was no longer only Edward's fortune, it was the burden of my son's betrayal too. Creeping through my own corridors like a thief, I returned to the luxury guest room and hid completely beneath the covers. With trembling fingers, I pressed the camera's tiny play button. The cassette's crackle and whir mixed with the pounding of my heart. This was the first recording of my personal hell. The image that filled the tiny screen showed our old sitting room, the one full of memories from before Sophie redesigned the house. There sat Sophie, not the polite woman I'd once thought she was, and my son Benjamin on the very sofas I loved. I pressed the headphones to my ears. The first thing captured by Edward's hidden microphone was Sophie's venomous whisper, devoid of any pretense of kindness. "Benjamin, I will never live in this dump for a single day. That woman's tasteless things make me sick." My breath caught. Instead of defending me, my son laughed with her. I heard him say, "Be patient, love. That plot beneath the house is worth a fortune. Mom's old now. She won't understand." He was planning the grave of his mother behind her back. As the tape continued, Sophie asked, "And if your mother refuses to leave, if she won't let us sell this wreck?" My son's answer made my blood run cold. "Then there's that big cellar under the house. She can manage there until the work is finished. What's the problem?" Hearing that, I realized my being thrown into the dark cellar had not been an accident. It had been a cruelly premeditated betrayal planned months in advance.
When the tiny screen of the handheld camera went dark, the little sanctuary I'd thought I'd made beneath the covers turned colder than that cellar ever was. I had to accept with a hollowness in my bones that the voices I'd heard belonged not to my dear Benjamin, but to a stranger who had sold his soul for land and money, someone who was planning to make his mother's home her grave. Suddenly, everything Edward had hidden made sense. He had known, long before I did, the dangerous hunger in our son, the poisonous influence of Sophie, and how the two of them together would wreck a life we had built. Those scratchy tapes in that rusty box were now more powerful than the fortune in the bank book. Money could buy my freedom, yes, but those recordings could buy justice, or at least expose what they had done. Hearing footsteps in the corridor, I shoved the camera and headphones back down beneath the mattress and folded myself into stillness. Letting them believe I was senile and helpless would be my greatest card. When the door opened and Sophie's suspicious face peered in, I lay with my eyes closed and my breathing slow. My plan was clear: play the part of the broken old woman until I had gathered enough strength. Then, with Edward's evidence and his fortune, I would descend like a nightmare upon them. After watching the betrayal on that little screen, the raw pain in me cooled into a calculating calm. I was no longer a passive victim in this house of faux compassion. I was a hunter waiting for the right moment, and madness would be my mask. On another silent night, I crept back to Edward's old cabinet and returned every tape and the little camera to their hiding place, relocking the rusty catch. I kept only the bank book and the small mysterious key against my chest. The physical proof was safe, and now my single goal was escape. Next, I put my plan into action. When Sophie brought me food, I stared at her with a blank, faraway look and asked, "Excuse me, madam, have you seen my husband, Edward? Why won't he come to me?" I could see the flicker of surprise in Sophie's eyes, and then a quick, selfish pleasure. She thought, the old woman has gone soft in the head. When Benjamin came bedside with guilt in his voice and tried to take my hand, "Mom, it's me, Benjamin." I yanked my hand away as if it were a stranger's and cried, "He's not my son. Who are you? Get out of my house." The look that passed over his face was a ruin of shame. Nothing he'd suffered in my cellar compared to that moment. Just as I'd predicted, Sophie drew her conclusion and turned it to advantage. That night, I heard her pull Benjamin aside and whisper, "Did you see? She's lost her mind. This is our chance. Tomorrow we'll get a doctor's assessment and start the paperwork for a guardianship order." And so, by their own greed and the eagerness to erase my rights, the ticket out of this house was placed at my feet.
The morning after I heard Sophie's plan to get a guardianship report, my son Benjamin and his wife bundled me into the car as if I were a valuable but unstable antique. The guilt in Benjamin's eyes was mixed with selfish relief. A mad mother would never ask them to account for their betrayal or challenge their plans. All the way to the private clinic they chose, I kept up the act, staring emptily out of the window as if nothing registered. Hidden beneath my coat against my chest were Edward's bank book and the small key, the last brave wager in a game they thought they were winning. In the clinic waiting room, Sophie rushed ahead and tried to steer the doctor with lies. She's been in the cellar, she's lost her mind, she's traumatized, while Benjamin sat trembling, his legs shaking. Their whole plan was to secure a report that would strip me of my remaining rights to the house and ultimately to the fortune they did not yet know existed. My madness would be their guarantee. At last the doctor called me in and gently barred Sophie and Benjamin from following. "I must speak with your patient alone first," she said. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Sitting opposite her, with the door closing on my sons and daughter-in-law's greedy faces, I let the mask slip. "Doctor," I said, "I have very little time. You must believe me. Believing me will save my life." When I saw the professional compassion on her face shift to puzzled concern, I didn't pause. I told her in one breath, "They brought me here to have me declared insane and seize everything. For months they kept me locked in my house's cellar like an animal." Noticing the doctor's hesitation and guessing she might write that off as part of my supposed illness, I unbuttoned my coat and placed Edward's bank book on her desk. "If you need proof," I said, "here is the first. A fortune my husband left that I never knew about, and they have no idea exists." The doctor's eyes widened when she read the balance. The reality of their motive hit her. I went on, "But the real proof isn't only the money. It's the recordings Edward hid, the videos in which they planned to lock me in the cellar months ago." I took her hand and said plainly, "Please help me. I must leave this house not as a patient, but as a free woman. Find me a solicitor. I cannot go back there. If they learn I know the truth, the cellar will be only the beginning. My next stop will be a real grave."
When I saw the compassion in the doctor's eyes harden into professional resolve, she said quietly, "You're safe here, Mrs. Turner." Then she lifted the receiver on her desk, not to summon the heartless pair waiting outside, but to call the people who could truly save my life, the police and a solicitor of my own. When I stepped out of that office, I was no longer a patient, but the rightful owner of my husband's legacy and of my own life. In the waiting room, Benjamin and Sophie, who had been expecting my certificate of madness, froze where they stood. Their greedy smiles withered as they saw me standing upright, flanked by 2 police officers. Sophie began to shriek, "This is a misunderstanding. Our mother isn't well." But before she could spin another lie, my solicitor handed the officers the tapes taken from Edward's hidden cabinet, the recordings in which my son's own voice revealed his plan to lock me in the cellar. Their deceit collapsed in seconds.
Benjamin, my beloved boy, sank to his knees the moment he heard himself condemn his own mother. But remorse, arriving too late, meant nothing now. The police arrested them both, my son and his venomous wife, on charges of unlawful imprisonment and inhumane treatment, and led them away from that luxury clinic in handcuffs. I stood watching them go, clutching Edward's small, rusty key in my palm. I had reclaimed my fortune, my home, and above all, the dignity and justice I thought I had lost in that freezing cellar. And for me, at last, everything was beginning again.